Mira Palmer had never cared about school spirit, let alone yearbooks. She didn't go to rallies, didn't dress for theme days, didn't pose for club photos. Her plan was to keep her head down and get out. But during a rainy Friday cleanup in the media center, she found something that changed everything. She had been assigned to help the librarian, Mrs. Drescher, organize the archive closet, a narrow, dust-smelling room behind the stacks, filled with AV cards, broken microscopes, and decades of boxed-up yearbooks. While lifting a cracked cardboard lid, Mira noticed one book that didn't match the others. It had no spine label. Its cover was black, not the usual school colors. The texture was strange, matte, almost like skin, and it was cold, colder than the air in the room, even with the old heater clanking nearby. She opened it. The first page was blank. No logo, no class motto, just thick, yellowed paper and a faded smell like wet ink sealed in old cloth. Then came the portraits. Rows and rows of student photos, but every face was smudged out, not pixelated, not scribbled, just missing. As if a finger had gently wiped the photo clean of its subject. The names were still there. Under each portrait, clean serif font: Anderson, Kylie, Barlow, D. Chen, Jacob, but no faces. Mira thought it was a misprint, some kind of unfinished edition, maybe a prank from a past senior class. But then she turned to the faculty page. One name caught her eye: Drescher, Miriam, librarian. The same Mrs. Drescher who had just told her she'd worked at the school for only 4 years. This yearbook was from 1991. Mira closed the book slowly and carried it out. "Hey, Mrs. Drescher," she asked casually, "how long have you been working here again?" The older woman looked up from her desk, smiled flatly. "For years, dear." Mira handed her the yearbook. Then, "Who's this?" The librarian stared. Her smile twitched, just slightly. She took the book without a word, flipped to the page, closed it, and set it aside. "That one shouldn't be in circulation," she said. "Thank you." The next day, the book was gone from the archive closet. Mira checked during lunch. Every box opened, every shelf scanned. It wasn't there. But something else had changed. In her second period class, Mr. Lang called roll. A name was skipped. Jason Chen, the boy who sat 2 seats to Mira's left, wasn't in his chair. Lang didn't ask where he was. No one seemed to notice. Later that day, in the cafeteria, Mira approached Jason's friend group. She asked where he was. They looked confused. "Jason," she said. "Jason Chen." They stared at her. "There's no one named Jason in our grade," one girl said. "Are you okay?" She felt her throat tighten. That night, Mira dug out her freshman year yearbook. Jason's photo was gone. Not just blank, gone. The surrounding photos had shifted, as if there had never been a space there to begin with. The surrounding photos had shifted, as if there had never been a space there to begin with. She flipped through the book frantically, checked club photos, team pages, class projects. Nothing. His name wasn't listed, not even in the index. She remembered him, his laugh, his handwriting, the way he hummed under his breath when working on math problems. But the school didn't, and neither did anyone else. The next day, she went back to the archive closet, found the 1991 yearbook again, sitting on top of a box, perfectly clean, waiting. She opened it. More names were missing. Where once there had been names under the faceless portraits, now there were only blank rectangles. Even the staff page had thinned. Mrs. Drescher's name was gone. When Mira approached the librarian at the desk, she wasn't there. Her chair was empty. The computer powered off. Another staff member, Mr. Donahue, was sorting books nearby. "Is Mrs. Drescher in today?" Mira asked. He looked at her blankly. "Who?" "The librarian." He smiled patiently. "It's me." She stared. "No, the woman who was here yesterday." "You must be thinking of Miss Fuller. She retired last spring." Mira stepped back. Everything felt slippery, like trying to balance on a floor made of oil and ice. She went to the main office, asked for Jason Chun's records. They didn't exist. "Are you sure he was a student here?" the secretary asked. Myra left. That night, she opened her own school ID. Her last name was spelled wrong. Myra Palmer had become Myra Palin. A subtle typo, barely noticeable, but enough to matter. She pulled out her old middle school transcript. Palmer. Then her student email. Palin. The change had already spread. She checked the yearbook again. Her photo was now dimmer than the others, slightly out of focus. Her name misaligned, printed just a hair lower than the rest. Her chest tightened. She flipped to the senior portraits. Found the blank spaces growing, not just in the past, but in the current year. As she reached the final page, something new had been added. A handwritten line at the bottom of the inside cover. "The ones remembered are the ones who remembered themselves." The ink was still wet. She slammed the book shut. The next morning, her locker wouldn't open. She tried 3 times. Her combination was correct. A teacher walked past. "Need help finding your locker, sweetie?" he asked. She froze. "This is my locker," she said. He frowned. "This is locker 284. That belongs to Alicia Patel." Mira's number had been 284. She checked the school's online portal. She wasn't listed in any of her classes. Her own name, the name she had been born with, written on forms, journals, exams, was gone. She ran to the archive. The 1991 book was gone. In its place, a new book, black cover, no label. She opened it. Blank pages. Then one, Mira, Palon, not yet erased. Below that, space for a photo. Empty. Then the lights flickered. Behind her, someone whispered her name. Not loud, not angry, just patient. She turned. The archive room was empty, but the smell of old paper was stronger than ever. She looked down at the book again. It now read, "One name remains." Will it remember itself? Mira took a pen from her backpack. On the first page, she wrote, "Mira Palmer," and underlined it. The ink bled into the page, deeper than it should have. She walked out. No one looked at her, but her name was back on her ID the next morning. Barely, faint print, almost translucent. She checks it every day now. And sometimes, just sometimes, she sees other names forming faintly on the back of her card. Names she doesn't remember yet. The substitute arrived during second period without warning. No one saw her come in through the hall or heard the door open. She was just there standing by the whiteboard, holding a folded piece of paper in one hand. Her clothes were formal, outdated in style, and her face held the kind of neutral expression you'd see in school portraits from decades ago. She didn't greet the class or acknowledge their confusion. She simply said, "Attendance." Then she unfolded the sheet of paper, placed it gently on the podium, and began reading names aloud. Her tone was steady, cold, and deliberate. "Alexander T," she said. A boy near the window muttered, "Here," unsure if this was some strange joke. She made a mark on the paper and continued without missing a beat. "Brennan L here," another answered. "Carter," our silence. "DeSoto J," more silence. The class started shifting in their seats. These weren't names from their roster. No one had ever heard or DeSoto. A few students exchanged glances. Someone half laughed under their breath, but the mood didn't invite humor. The substitute's face remained unchanged as she made another mark and kept reading. One student raised her hand hesitantly, confused. Before she could speak, the substitute said, without looking up, "No interruptions." Her voice was calm but final. The hand slowly lowered. That's when the lights dimmed. Slightly, not enough to make anyone panic, but enough for everyone to notice. The room suddenly felt too still. Erickson, D, nothing. Fraser, N. Mia, sitting near the front, flinched slightly. That was her mother's maiden name. She looked up at the substitute but didn't speak. The substitute didn't pause either. She simply marked the sheet again and kept going. The windows showed the courtyard, but the wind had stopped. The trees were motionless. Even the shadows weren't moving. Some students looked toward the clock above the whiteboard. It should have rung by now. The second hand was stuck between ticks. It twitched in place, like it couldn't decide whether to move forward or back. No one said anything. They just watched the substitute continue down the list. Gideon L. Huntley, K. Ishikawa, T. A student near the door, Tyler, stood up. "Okay, this is dumb," he said, grabbing his bag. "I'm going to the office." He walked confidently to the door, turned the handle, and stopped. The knob didn't turn. He yanked harder. Nothing. Then he looked back at the class, pale. "She locked us in," he whispered. "Won't open." "Jackson P.," the substitute said, unfazed. She hadn't missed a beat. Her voice didn't waver. It was as though Tyler wasn't even there. Then, calmly, she said it again. "Jackson P." Tyler backed away from the door, still holding the handle. "That's not me," he said aloud, even though no one had accused him. "Jackson P.," she repeated. The lights flickered once. When they came back on, Tyler was gone. His chair remained. His bag sat untouched. But he was no longer in the room. A murmur ran through the students like an aftershock. No one screamed. They didn't dare. One girl at the back started quietly crying into her sleeve. The substitute didn't react. She read the next name. Keller, M. The crying stopped. It wasn't fear that held them in place. It was something older, something deeper. Someone whispered, "This has to be a dream." Another whispered back, "Then why haven't we woken up?" The substitute kept going. Langston, E. Martin, C. Nelson, V. Owens, B. The air in the room grew heavier. The sound of her voice filled every corner like fog. Some desks began to creak, shifting slightly as if nudged from underneath. The humming in the walls grew louder. It wasn't from the lights. Peterson, H. Quinn, D. Then came a name none of them recognized. Ramirez, J. Ava, sitting beside the window, raised her hand slowly. She didn't know why she did it. Her name wasn't Ramirez, but something told her to respond. "Here," she said quietly. The substitute looked up for the first time and nodded once. Noted. After that, Ava didn't speak again. Her ID badge later that day would read J. Ramirez, and no one would question it. The roll call continued. The classroom grew darker, despite the daylight outside. The courtyard faded to gray. The sky beyond the windows no longer moved. Someone pulled out their phone dead screen. No signal. Another student tried theirs. Nothing. The substitute never paused. Santiago, E. Trenton, G. S. Somewhere in the middle of the list, one student saw their own name appear again. It had already been called. They had already answered, but the substitute repeated it as if hearing it for the first time. The student remained silent. They didn't want to tempt whatever came next. Then the substitute said, "Warren, J." A girl near the back stood up. "I'm not Warren," she said, trembling. "Warren, J." the substitute repeated. The girl blinked rapidly, chest rising and falling in panic. "If I say it, what happens?" she asked. The substitute only stared. The girl exhaled and said, "Here." Her face faded slightly, just enough to make others uncomfortable. Her name tag peeled off her desk. A new one slid into place. Warren J. By the time the substitute reached the last name on the list, the room had changed. The desks had rotated inward, forming a perfect circle. The substitute stood in the center, unfolding a new page. This one was blank, but she looked at it as if it were filled. "These are the names to come," she said. "Make up attendance." The students sat frozen. She asked, "Who will answer now?" The bell never rang. The windows never brightened. And one by one, names kept being called. It started with a seat in the back of room 305, a simple desk. Second, from the window, with a name tag taped to its surface, J. L. Wynne. No one noticed when it appeared. Not even Ms. Bell, the English teacher. One Monday morning, she paused before class and stared at the desk for a long time. That desk wasn't there last week, she said to herself. But when she asked the front office if a new student had transferred in, they said no. No J. Elwyn was listed in the system. No ID, no records, nothing. Yet, every day, the chair was warm. The desk sometimes had papers inside. Once, a pencil rolled off the edge when Miss Bell walked past it. She hadn't touched it. A few students started joking about it. "Must be the ghost student," one said. J. Elusive. But jokes faded fast, because he started showing up in photos. At first, it was just a shadow at the edge of the Yearbook Club group shot. Then, a blurred figure in the chess team poster. Then, unmistakably, a boy standing behind the school flag in the science fair banner. Medium height, dark hair, school uniform, slightly wrinkled. Nobody remembered taking the photo with him. And yet, there he was. A student named Callan Hayes started noticing more. Callan wasn't the paranoid type. He was logical, grounded, kept to himself. But even he couldn't ignore that the mystery student, J. Elwyn, began showing up in places Callan had just left. Twice, Callan went to the library and left a book open on the table. When he came back, a note was inside. "Thanks for reading that. Signed, J.E." Another time, his locker was slightly ajar. He never left it open. Inside was a single printed photo. It showed Callan and a boy he didn't recognize sitting together on the school bleachers, both smiling, but Callan had never seen that photo before. He wasn't even sure he'd ever sat on those bleachers. When he brought it to the office, they said the printer it came from had been out of order for 2 years. Still, no one had a record of J. Elwyn. The school secretary checked every system. "I'm telling you," she said, "there's no such student." Callan decided to investigate on his own. He asked Miss Bell if she remembered assigning the desk. She said she didn't, but that she had started writing a name on her seating chart unconsciously. "It just looked right," she said, eyes distant, like he's always been there. Callan began comparing attendance sheets. J. Elwyn's name appeared on 3 rosters from different teachers. In each one, it was written in different handwriting. When he checked the online database, there was a student profile, but the fields were all blank, except for one: graduation year, 2031. It was brief, a flash during morning routine, but unmistakable. Callan was brushing his teeth, looked up, and there, over his shoulder, stood someone. Same dark hair, same height, but not quite him. The face was familiar, yet off, matured, worn, like looking at yourself 5 years from now, after something terrible had happened. He turned fast, no one there. From that point forward, things escalated. The photos started to change. Older ones, from freshman year, even middle school, began showing J. Elwyn in the background, not always clearly. Sometimes just a shadow, a foot, the edge of a shoulder, but always near Callan. He found his 8th grade class photo in a scrapbook his mom kept. There he was, Callan, front row. And just behind him, a boy with a half smile. A tag on the frame read, "Field Day 2020," but the name list on the back had been changed. Next to Callan's name, someone had added in pen, A.K. A. Elwyn. That night, Callan couldn't sleep. He had dreams of sitting at the desk in room 305, except the room was abandoned. Dusty, covered in vines. And on the board was written, "You came early." The next day, he asked the principal directly, "Has anyone ever graduated who wasn't supposed to be here yet?" The principal blinked. "You mean like a prodigy?" "No, I mean someone who arrived before they were born." The principal stared for a long moment, then said, "Don't ask that question again." Callan returned to room 35 after school. The desk was still there. A book sat on it. Foundations of Temporal Identity. Inside, the front page had been signed to me. Callan backed away from the desk. That night, he pulled up the school server and searched his own name. 2 profiles appeared. Callan Hayes. Student ID number 1010934. Callan J. Elwin. Student ID hash pending. He printed the screen. The next day, both profiles were gone. He approached Miss Bell one final time. "Who is he?" he asked. "Who is J. Elwin?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Some students arrive before they're ready. Others stay too long." "But that doesn't make sense," Callan said. "He's me." Ms. Bell nodded. "That's what he said too." As Callan left the classroom, he passed the mirror in the hallway again. This time, there were 2 reflections, both watching him. Only one moved.